Well, something dramatic happened in my family this past week. Not my family in our home, but with my siblings and my mother. My mother turned 88 in October. And she's doing great, but we have noticed over time that she is getting a little more frail, that her reflexes are not what they used to be, and her vision is not what it used to be. And so we began to have the conversation months ago with her about you know what, right? Driving. And many of you personally have gone through this, and or someone in your family, so you know that it's a struggle to have that conversation and to try to encourage a person to take that step of giving up driving, because driving is your ticket to independence, right? When you can't drive, you're either stuck home or you're dependent on other people to take you where you want to go. But my mom has been great, and though she doesn't like it, and I can't blame her, because I won't if I live that long to reach that point, she's been great about it. And so I have a brother and two sisters. There's 4 of us kids. And so we knew that when we encouraged her to reach a point where she would stop driving, that we had to step up as far as providing transportation for her. And so we kind of put together a family schedule so that she can get to church. She goes to Episcopal Church in Williamstown, and get to the hairdresser and doctor's appointments and the library and all those things. So I have my part that I play. And as I thought about how this will impact my schedule, I thought, I don't mind at all. Because I thought about everything that my mom has done for me in my life. And I thought to myself, you know what? Now I can give back, and I can do something for her, because I could never give back to her everything that she has given me in life. Beyond just your basic mom responsibilities, my mother has been an amazing influence in my life. And she's always been my hero. And she's the kind of person who never wants any credit. She's the kind of person who, as kids, or as teenagers going on a date, she'd lend us money. And then we would pay her back, and she'd say, oh, I completely forgot that I lent you that money. She wasn't like waiting, to get that money back. It's just how generous in spirit that my mom is. And, back in the day, she would do the things that moms did, taking care of the household, doing our wash, hanging it out on the clothesline. You remember those days? Maybe some of you still do, I don't know. But I can still picture her out in the backyard on a windy day with the clothespins, hanging out the wash, preparing meals. And then when my dad, particularly at a time in our family life when my dad lost his job and was out of work for a long time, my mom went to work outside the home, got a job, and she was doing that all day and then coming home and doing the home things. And then as we grew up, still the great influence in our lives, my siblings and I, helping us with our kids and taking kids to the ball practice or wherever they needed to be. And even today at 88, when I go visit my mom, she's baked some kind of bread and says, here, I made this for you. I mean, she's just never stopped giving. Now, I hope to give back some more. And I can't give enough. I could never outgive my mom for all that she's done for me. And I'm happy to do it. And it makes sense, I guess, that I'm happy to do it because it's actually biblical. It's this principle or this idea, and I hope you've experienced it in your life, that when you are grateful, when you are truly heartfelt grateful for something that someone's done for you, it leads to generosity. When you're glad, when you're blessed that someone's helped you in some way, spent time with you, given you something, you want to give too. It's the gratitude that kicks in the generosity. It just naturally leads to generosity. And that's one of the verses in the Bible that we were pointed to this week. If you've been reading that book that we've been reading as a congregation, Robert Schneese's book, Practicing Extravagant Generosity, one of the readings this past week he pointed to Psalm 116, verse 12, which says, "What shall I return to the Lord for all his goodness to me?" What shall I give back to the Lord for all that he's given me? Another translation says, how can I repay the Lord for all that he's done for me? How could we ever begin to repay enough for what God's given us? Now you might say, you know what? Life hasn't been that fantastic for me lately, and I'm not feeling really grateful. And I get that, because we all have periods like that in life. At the same time, if we really stop and reflect, even on this day, what God's given us that we take for granted. You got up this morning, evidently, because you're here. Are you breathing? Oh, and God gave you oxygen. Your heart's beating. May not be beating as well as you like it to beat, but it must be beating. You're here. He provided transportation that you got here. Most of us had some kind of a breakfast this morning, even if it was Wawa coffee on the way to the church. And you're sitting among friends, among people who care about you, even if you don't know them that well. And you likely have people in your life who care about you. I could go on and on and on. God's given you a brain that usually works well. A brain that allows you to think and to ponder, to create, a heart that enables you to love. The list is as long as you can make it if you stop and think about all the things that God has given you. How can I repay the Lord? Well, it's God's nature to be generous, and we know that because of what the Bible tells us. God created the world and gave it to us and said, here, it's for you to take care of. And when we messed it up, and when we mess up in our own lives, God sent a Savior so that we could get it right, so that we could find forgiveness and hope and start over again in Christ, the life of faith. God just keeps giving and giving and giving. And so if we're to be Christians, which means that word means Christ-like, if we're to follow Christ, then we need to know what God's generosity looks like so that we can imitate it. And there again, the Bible tells us. In the Gospel according to Luke, there are many stories of what Jesus did when he was with other people. There are 3 stories I want to just quickly lift up because they give us a glimpse at what godly generosity looks like, the kind of generosity that we're called to have when we live. And again, when I talk about generosity, I know our minds immediately go to money. I'm not just talking about money. I'm talking about your life. I'm talking about your spirit. I'm talking about whether you take time for other people. I'm talking about whether you serve. Generosity is a bigger picture. And that's what some of these stories indicate. The first story from Luke is the story about the widow who put in her 2 little coins when she went to worship in the temple. It was a funny thing in Bible times when you gave your offering, you kind of paraded up to the pot where they would have in the temple. And back then they didn't have paper money, so it was coins. So people listened when people gave their offering because you could get a sense of what somebody was giving based on how much noise their offering made, if you follow what I'm saying. If you put your offering in and it went clang, 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 it was like, oh, they put a lot in. If you put your offering in and it just went tinkle, it was like, oh, is that it? You know? And you know how people are, right? We're nosy. And we're curious. And we'll look and we'll listen. So there's Jesus one day in the temple, Luke tells us, with his disciples, and they're just kind of watching people go by as they put their money in. And it was a widow, a poor widow. No doubt she was poor, because in those times, if you didn't have a husband, there wasn't much a woman could do to make a living. So when your spouse died, it was huge as far as a life change. And she comes up to the pot and she throws in what basically was the equivalent of 2 pennies. And other people might have thought, her offering just made a little ding. But Jesus calls the disciples' attention to her and says, look at this widow. Look what she's done. She's put in all she had. You see, it's not always the total amount. Bill Gates could write us a check for $1,000, but In terms of what he's got, that's probably pocket change, right? The Bible always talks about giving in terms of proportionate giving. And so she gave all that she had when she put in those 2 pennies. Her giving was extravagant. That's what we're talking about during these weeks, extravagant giving. Not giving that's obligatory. Well, I guess I got to put something in. Not helping somebody out who's having a hard time because you feel you have to. Not putting something in the plate because you'll feel guilty if you don't. Not that kind of giving. We're talking about extravagant giving. Giving out of joy, giving out of gratitude, giving because you want to. Giving because it's the call of Christ in your life. And you remember what Christ has done for you. So, godly giving is extravagant giving. The second characteristic of giving comes from the story of Zacchaeus. You know the story of Zacchaeus, the wee little man? You know that song? The Bible tells us in Luke's gospel that Zacchaeus was a short man. He was a tax collector. And he was a thief. He would basically rob people. He collected taxes, but he always told them that they owed more than what they really owed. You know those IRS people. You got to watch them, right? So people knew that he did that. But you know, he was working for Rome, and there was nothing they could do. So nobody liked Zacchaeus. He was a short man who stole from people. That was his reputation. But one day Jesus was coming through town, and Zacchaeus wanted desperately to see Jesus. So he climbed a tree because he was so short he couldn't see over people. So he's up in the tree, and Jesus comes through town, and Jesus comes over to the tree and looks up and says, Zacchaeus, come down. He invites himself for dinner. He says, I'm coming to your house today. And Zacchaeus says, you want to come over my house? Nobody comes to my house. Nobody wants to eat with me. Nobody likes me. Nobody cares about me. You, Jesus, the master, the teacher, the rabbi, you want to come to my house? Yes, Zacchaeus. Because you count. And I want to show you how your life can change. And indeed it did. Zacchaeus, in his encounter with Jesus, says, my life is now new. I will give half of what I have to the poor, and if I've cheated anybody, I'll give back 4 times. And Jesus says, surely today salvation has come to this household. Out of gratitude, Zacchaeus says, I must share my life with others. I must bless others because I've been blessed with this gift of new life. And so what we can say about God's generosity is it's life-changing. When God gets a hold of you, he changes your life. If you don't like change, I know most of us don't, but if you really don't want to be different and be better, then don't read the Bible. It's a dangerous book. It will change your life. Even if you already know Jesus and call yourself a Christian, warning, warning, if you read the Bible, it will continue to change your life because the Bible is a living book. And as you encounter God's word, it will continue to work in your heart. And if you're open to it, it'll continue to grow you in all kinds of ways. It'll even grow your generosity if you continue to be grateful. So generosity is life-changing. When Zacchaeus realized that he was being blessed by Jesus, he said, I got to share, man. It's all different now. Different game, different life. And finally, the third story is the story of the Good Samaritan. Some of you may know this story. We use that expression today. Somebody does something nice for somebody, we say, oh, they're a good Samaritan. It's this parable that Jesus told, and it's about a man who goes on a journey, and he gets robbed and beat up, and he's left for dead in the road. And then 2 religious people come by, and they don't want anything to do with him. They just keep on walking. But then a guy comes along, and he's a Samaritan. What's a Samaritan? Well, a Samaritan was somebody that nobody liked. Here we go again. A Samaritan, according to the Jews, was like a half-breed. They had married outside of the Jewish family. And so the Jews didn't want anything to do with Samaritans. But along comes a Samaritan while this Jewish man is lying, looking like he's dead on the road, And it's the Samaritan that stops. And he bandages up his wounds, puts him on his animal, takes him to an inn, and says to the innkeeper, take care of him. Provides for his long-term care. It says, when I come back through town, if I still owe you some money, I'll make good with you. It was compassion that led the Samaritan to stop and help. That's where generosity comes from. That's what generosity is about. It's about compassion. When you see a need, when you begin to realize that what God's given you is a blessing to you, but it's enough that it can be shared. The time that you have, the talents that you have, the resources that you have can make a difference in the lives of other people. And when you feel for other people's plight and you share yourself, that's generosity. That's a characteristic of godly generosity. It's the kind of generosity that's extravagant. It's life-changing. It's marked by compassion. And that's the kind of generosity that we're called to have. And so this morning, I invite you to think about your own generosity. What's it like? Is it extravagant? Is it marked by compassion? Has it been life-changing for you? As you think about what God's done for you in your life, does your generosity reflect your true gratitude? So that as God looks at your life and your generous spirit, can he tell that you're really grateful for what he's done for you? Or have you been living a life where you've kind of separated your generosity from your gratitude? You've just kind of been generous within yourself. You haven't expressed it. You haven't demonstrated your gratitude by being generous. I could never repay my mom. I'm happy to do what she wants and what she needs as a sign, as a generous sign. Mom, I love you, and I'm so grateful for everything that you've given me in my life and everything you've done for me, all the time that you spent for me. Through my dating years when I drove her crazy, talking about someone I was breaking up with or whatever, she listened through all that. Never told me what to do, just loved me and supported me. I could never do enough for her. What has God done for you? Do you feel a sense of gratitude? Because to be honest, if you really, really do get serious with yourself, you got to know that God's done everything for you and for me. When you think about John 3:16, the famous verse from the Bible, and what that really means, that God's love is so great that he would even want to come down here in this ugly world. I mean, we don't like this world. Let's face it, we always talk about, complain about things that happen, and corruption in government, and people aren't the same anymore, and blah, blah, blah. That's the world that God said, I'm coming down. I'm sending my son Jesus. And so he became a person, born in that stable and grew up still being the holy person that he was, but rubbing shoulders with sinful people, having to deal with that. What that must have been like, being holy and pure himself. And then when the time came, when the time was right, the God-given time, Jesus allowed himself to be taken away, to be arrested. For what? For preaching love. And they took him and they teased him and they mocked him and they spit on him and they tortured him. They didn't drag him away. He surrendered his life as our gift. And they nailed him to that cross, and he hung there in agony, and he did it willingly, because he knows you hurt, and he knows that you've been disappointed, and he knows that you've experienced brokenness in your life, and he's wanted desperately to save you from that and help you and journey with you through that and speak to you of a better life and a better place and a better way. And he didn't just send you an email from heaven, which would have been a lot easier for him. He said, no, I want people to know that I truly love them. I'm coming down. And so This season, Advent, Christmas, it's about the gift of Christ, the gift of life. And it's about us saying, you know what? I am blessed. I've got all this stuff going on, but I am blessed. And I want God to know it. And I want to express my gratitude through my generosity. And I know that if I take that step of faith, if I do that, I'm going to be blessed even more, because it's going to draw me closer to Christ and closer to others. And I'll experience a peace and a joy that I wouldn't otherwise have. And so as we get ready to share the bread and the cup, I invite you in these next moments to really think about, what would your life be like without Jesus? What would your life be like without God? It was just you, and that was it. How much of a loss we would be at without Christ in our lives. Oh, Father, forgive us for the times that we have forgotten you in our day-to-day living. We get caught up in all kinds of stuff, and we forget how blessed we are. And some of us aren't feeling blessed for sure, because we're in the midst of some tough stuff. But Lord, we know that you're there, and we know that you care, and so we thank you for sticking by us. We can never repay you fully, Lord, for all that you've done for us. And we know that in this act of Holy Communion, we're called to remember those events in Jesus' life that are life-changing for us. And so we express our gratitude, and we pray that as we share the bread and the cup, it will be an experience of life change as we experience your grace in these moments. As we confess our sin and turn to you, come to us, Lord, and renew us. Recalibrate our lives, rearrange our priorities. Speak words of hope and gratitude into us, that we might live holding on to your love, your grace, your mercy. Bless this time of sharing. Bless the elements as we receive them by faith in the great and mighty name of Jesus. Amen.